The red dust of Mars settled on everything. It was a fine orange powder that coated the boots of the cadets and the dark gray walls of the Terran Republic Military Academy. Jin stood at perfect attention on the main parade ground. The Martian wind, cold and thin, tugged at his formal uniform. He did not move. His dark eyes were fixed on the landing pad in the distance. Next to him, his friend Tay shifted his weight slightly. "Do you think they will be as big as they say?" Tay whispered. His voice was nervous. Jin gave a single, slow nod. He had seen the files. The Cathar were the most feared warriors in the known galaxy. They came from a heavy gravity world. They were strong, fast, and merciless. Their culture was simple. The strongest ruled. The weak were ignored. Jin understood this logic. It was clean. It was clear. It was the opposite of how the human military worked. A low hum grew into a deep roar. A ship descended from the pink sky. It was not sleek or graceful. It was a block of dark metal, all sharp angles and weapon ports. It looked like a giant rock that could crush you. It settled onto the landing pad without a sound. The air seemed to get heavier. The Academy Commandant, an old woman with short white hair and a back as straight as a laser sight, walked forward. Her name was Park. She had fought in the border wars. She was not afraid of anything. Jin watched her, using her calm posture to steady his own breathing. A ramp extended from the ship with a hiss. The Cathar delegation walked down. A silence fell over the cadets. The files did not do them justice. They were huge. The smallest of them was at least 7 feet tall. Their skin was like polished black stone, covered in a network of fine white scars. They had thick necks and powerful limbs. Their eyes were a solid pale yellow with no visible pupil. They wore minimal armor, as if their own bodies were shield enough. At the front of the group was their leader. He was bigger than the others, wider in the shoulders. His scars were more numerous and deeper. His cold yellow eyes scanned the rows of human cadets. His gaze was like a physical weight. Jin felt it pass over him, and he forced himself to stand even taller. The alien's expression did not change, but Jin saw the faintest twitch of his lip. It was a look of pure disgust. The Commandant's voice cut through the quiet. "War Chief Kale, welcome to the Terran Republic Military Academy." The giant alien Kale stopped before her. His voice was a low rumble like stones grinding together. "Commandant Park." He did not bow. He did not offer a greeting. His eyes continued to move over the cadets. "So these are your best? The future of your military?" "They are," Commandant Park said, her voice steady. Kyle made a sound deep in his throat. "They look soft, fragile. I see no warriors. I see children playing dress-up." A few of the cadets flinched. Jin did not. He kept his eyes forward, his face a mask. He understood the challenge. This was not a diplomatic visit. This was an inspection by a predator who believed he was looking at prey. Commandant Park's smile was thin and sharp. "Appearances can be deceiving, War Chief. We are happy to show you our methods." Kale's attention finally settled on Jin. He seemed to sense Jin's discipline, the control in his posture. He took a step toward him. What is your name, little human?" "Cadet Jin, sir," Jin answered, his voice clear and loud. "Do you believe you are a warrior, Cadet Jin?" Kyle asked. Jin thought for a moment. "I am a student of war, sir." Kyle seemed mildly amused. "A student? We do not have students on my world. We have killers, or we have the dead." He turned back to the Commandant. "I will observe your young students. I will see these methods. Perhaps I will find something of interest, but I doubt it." The Commandant assigned guides for the Cathar. She called forward a young woman. She was small with a calm and intelligent face. Her name was Mira. She was not the strongest cadet or the fastest, but she was the best strategist in the entire academy. She could see patterns and solutions that others missed. "Mira will be one of your guides during your stay," Commandant Park said. Kale looked down at Mira. He dismissed her with a glance. "This one? She is even smaller than the rest. What use is a warrior who can be broken with one hand?" Mira did not look away. She met his yellow gaze. "A warrior can be strong, sir. A mind can be stronger." Kale snorted, a puff of steam in the cold air. "We shall see." He looked back at Jin. "I will watch you, Cadet Jin. I will watch all of you. Show me why the galaxy should fear humanity." He said the last word like it was a joke. The tour began. Kyle and his warriors moved through the academy. They looked at the training fields, the simulation rooms, the lecture halls. Everywhere they went, Kale found something to criticize. The obstacle course was too simple. The weight training equipment was for children. The tactical simulators were just games. He watched a class where cadets were learning field medicine. "You waste so much time trying to save one life," Kyle remarked. "A wounded warrior who cannot fight is a burden. He should be left behind. It strengthens the whole." The human instructor, a doctor, stared at him. "We do not leave our people behind, sir. That is the one rule." Kale shook his massive head. "A foolish rule. Sentiment is a weakness." Later, they stood on an observation deck overlooking a large, sandy training area. 2 squads of cadets were starting a live fire simulation. Lasers zipped through the air and smoke grenades bloomed. Jin's squad was moving in a perfect wedge formation. They used hand signals to communicate. They provided cover for each other. They advanced in a controlled, precise manner. Cal watched, his arms crossed. "They move like machines," he said to no one in particular. "It is predictable." A Cathar battle cry would shatter their focus. We would not hide behind rocks. We would charge. We would break them. Their neat little formation would mean nothing. Jin, who was standing nearby, heard him. He remained silent. He saw the efficiency in his squad's movements. They were conserving energy, minimizing risk. A direct charge was powerful, but it was also wasteful. It left you exposed. Kyle turned to Jin. "You lead this squad?" "I do, sir," Jin said. "Your tactics are slow. Careful, you fight not to lose, not to win." "There is a difference." Jin thought about explaining the concept of sustained campaigns, of logistics, of winning the war, and not just the battle, but he stayed quiet. The war chief would not understand. He saw only the single immediate fight. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the red landscape, Kyle stood with the commandant once more. His opinion had not changed. "Your academy is impressive," he said, and the words sounded hollow. "For a species that values comfort. You have many machines to do your thinking. You have many rules to protect your weak. But you have no fire. You have no true warriors." Commandant Park simply nodded. "The week is long, War Chief. We have many more games to show you." Kale looked toward the barracks where the cadets lived. He thought of Jin's rigid discipline and Mira's quiet confidence. They were in puzzle. A frustrating one. They were not strong, yet they were not afraid. They were not warriors, yet they trained for war with a dedication he had to respect, even if he found it misplaced. He had come to confirm that humanity was a minor power, a fluke, but a small nagging doubt had entered his mind. These humans were hiding something. They were not hiding a secret weapon. It was something else, something in their spirit. He would find it. He would expose it. And he would prove that the Cathar were the galaxy's true masters of war. The morning after the Cathar arrival began with the roar of engines and the smell of ozone. War Chief Cal stood, a hulking statue of obsidian flesh at the edge of the Academy's main simulation deck. Below, in a vast arena of projected terrain, Cadet Jin's squad was engaged in a live fire exercise. Lasers set to a non-lethal sting crisscrossed the fake urban landscape. Jin's team moved like a single organism. A cadet would dash from one piece of cover to the next. The moment he moved, 2 others would rise and lay down a blanket of suppressing fire. Then they would switch. It was a flawless, rhythmic dance of advance and cover. Jin, at the center, directed it all with sharp, clear hand signals. His voice was calm on the squad's comms. "Team 2, pivot left. Team 1, suppressive fire on the upper window, advance." From the observation platform above, Kyle watched, his yellow eyes unblinking. His massive arms were crossed over his chest. The human commandant stood beside him, her face neutral. "They are precise," Kyle rumbled, his tone making the words sound like an insult, like insects. "Each has its small, simple task. There is no heart, no fury." He pointed a thick clawed finger at the simulation. "A Cathar warrior does not hide. He announces his presence. He charges the strongest point of the enemy line. He breaks it. The enemy's will shatters with the first roar. What you are doing is slow, predictable. You waste time." Down below, Jin's squad secured the objective, a mock communications array. They had suffered 0 casualties. The exercise was a perfect success by Academy standards. Kale turned to the Commandant. "This is your best? This careful, fearful creeping?" Commandant Park offered a thin smile. "Efficiency is not fear, War Chief. It is intelligence. My cadets have won their objective without losing a single soldier. A soldier who never risks death has never truly fought, Kale stated, as if it were a simple fact. He does not know what he is made of. The next demonstration was a strategic war game. It was held in a large circular room with a holographic table at its center. The scenario was a classic siege. A human force was defending a fortified city against a larger, technologically superior enemy. The cadets were tasked with breaking the siege, Kyle observed as the senior cadets debated. They suggested reinforcing the walls, contesting the airspace, launching counterattacks on the enemy's forward positions. They were all direct military solutions. Kale grunted. Finally, you think of fighting, but your solutions are still weak. You try to match their strength. A Cathar warband would gather all its force. We would punch through their siege line in one place like a spear through soft wood. We would pour into their camp and burn it. The shock alone would win the day. Then a quiet voice spoke from the side of the room. It was Cadet Tay, the young man who had been nervous at the landing. He was known for his skill with logistics and supply lines, subjects Kale had dismissed as counting rations for the week. Sir, Tay said, his voice hesitant but clear. What if we don't attack their soldiers? The room went quiet. All eyes turned to him. Kyle scowled. Do not attack the soldiers. Then you attack the air? The dirt? Tay stepped closer to the hologram. He manipulated the controls. The display zoomed out from the city walls to show the landscape behind the enemy army. We attack their supplies here. He highlighted a long, winding route through a mountain pass. This is their only supply line. It is long and vulnerable. He then highlighted several points in the enemy camp, and their command structure is here and here. They are centralized. They rely on a few key commanders. He proposed a plan. A small, fast team of specialists would sneak through the harsh, unguarded mountains. They would not fight the enemy soldiers. They would destroy the supply depot far behind the lines. At the same time, a team of snipers and saboteurs would infiltrate the camp and eliminate the key commanders. On the hologram, the results played out. The enemy army, cut off from food, fuel, and ammunition, and with its leadership in chaos, began to falter. Their coordinated assault on the city fell apart into confused, isolated attacks that the defenders easily repelled. The siege was broken. The human forces won with very few casualties. They never fought the enemy's main strength. Kale was silent for a long moment. The holographic light played over his stony face. He was not just unimpressed. He was offended. This, he finally growled, the sound full of contempt. This is not war. This is trickery. It is dishonorable. You strike at the food and the leaders from the shadows. You are too afraid to face the warriors in front of you. You have no honor. Cadet Mira, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. She had helped Tay refine the plan. With respect, War Chief, she said, her tone calm and logical. The goal was to save the city and break the siege. The goal was achieved. Our people lived. The enemy was defeated. Where is the dishonor in that? Kale turned his cold gaze on her. The dishonor is in the method. War is a test of strength, of will against will. You bypass the test. You cheat. You are like the creature that bites the ankle and runs away. It is a coward strategy. Mira did not back down. You call it cheating. We call it tactics. You call it cowardice. We call it preserving the lives of our soldiers. Why lose 10,000 in a frontal assault when you can win by losing 10? This is why you are weak. Kale's voice rose to a thunderous level, making the hologram flicker. You value one life too much. You cling to it. A Cathar gives his life gladly for the glory of the clan. Death in battle is the highest honor. Your fear of death is a chain that holds you back from true power. Mira looked at the giant alien, and for the first time there was a flicker of pity in her eyes. We do not fear death, War Chief, she said softly. We just love life more, and we fight for the people beside us so they can return to their families. We do not fight for the glory of dying. Her words hung in the air. Kale stared at her. The concept was so alien, so utterly foreign to his entire being that he could not process it. To fight not for the glory of conquest but for the simple, mundane act of going home. It was illogical. It was sentimental. It was weak. And yet it had produced a strategy that had undeniably won. He looked from Mira's determined face to Tay's nervous one, to Jin's stoic expression. They were not warriors as he knew warriors to be. They were something else. They were thinkers. They were planners. They were connectors. The frustration boiled inside him. He had come to see warriors, and he found philosophers with guns. He wanted to see strength, and he was shown cleverness. It was maddening. He turned and strode from the war game room, his heavy footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He needed to see them in a context he understood. He needed to see them pushed to their physical limits, where philosophy and cleverness meant nothing, where only raw strength and endurance mattered. He would find the truth of humanity there in the dust and the pain. He would prove that when the clever tricks failed, their soft bodies and sentimental hearts would break. He went to find the commandant. He had a request. He wanted to participate in their most brutal training exercise. He wanted to join them in the crucible. The request was unprecedented. A visiting dignitary, a war chief no less, demanding to participate in the Academy's most grueling test. Commandant Park heard Kale out, her expression unreadable. She knew what he was doing. He was looking for a weakness he could understand. A physical one. "The crucible is a training exercise, War Chief," she said. "It is designed to push our cadets to their absolute limit. It is not a game." "Good," Kale rumbled. "I'm tired of games. I wish to see their limits. I wish to see what happens when their machines and their tricks are taken away." "Very well," the commandant said after a moment. "But you will not participate alone. You will be integrated into a cadet squad. You will follow the same rules. You will rely on the same equipment," Kale agreed. He was assigned to Jin's squad. The cadets received the news in silence. They were already preparing mentally for the 72-hour ordeal. In the deep canyons of Valles Marineris, adding a hostile, impatient alien giant to the mix was a complication nobody wanted. 3 days later, they stood at the edge of the Great Canyon. The sun was a cold, distant coin in the pink sky. The wind howled, whipping red dust into their faces. They wore standard survival gear and carried heavy packs. Their advanced tech was limited to basic life support and a simple emergency beacon. The crucible was about primal survival. The exercise began. The first challenge was a series of brutal physical obstacles. A sheer rock face to climb, a raging ice-cold water channel to cross, a long, heavy log that the entire squad had to carry across a broken field. This was where Kale shone. He was a force of nature. When the cadets struggled to find handholds on the cliff, Kale simply dug his powerful fingers into the rock and climbed, his strength making the task look easy. He dropped a rope for the others, watching with detached interest as they slowly, carefully made their way up. At the water channel, the current was strong enough to sweep a person away. The cadets linked arms, forming a human chain, fighting to get across. Kale waded into the center, planted his feet wide, and stood like an unmovable pillar. The water crashed against his chest and did nothing. The cadets used his body as an anchor to cross safely. When it came time to carry the heavy log, Kyle took the front, lifting most of the weight onto his broad shoulders. The cadets at the back barely felt the strain. He moved with a powerful, ground-eating stride that forced them into a jog just to keep up. Through it all, he said little, but his message was clear. He was carrying them. He was the strength. They were the burden. His initial assessment seemed to be proving correct. Jin, however, was not bothered. He watched Kyle, but he also watched his team. He made sure they drank water. He rotated the cadets carrying the log so no one became too exhausted. He kept them moving at a sustainable pace. Kale saw this as coddling. Jin saw it as resource management. The second day brought the chemical fog. It was a simulated weapon effect, a thick greenish mist that rolled through the canyon without warning. It was completely opaque. It blocked all advanced sensors. It rendered their helmet displays into a mess of static. Inside the fog, visibility dropped to less than an arm's length. The world shrank to a tiny, eerie circle of green. For the human cadets, this was a known, if difficult, part of the test. They had trained for it, standard blind formation. Jin's voice was calm and clear on the basic, short-range radio that still worked. "Tay, you're on point with me. Mira navigation. Everyone. Hand on the shoulder of the person in front. No one gets separated." The squad instantly formed a single-file line. Each cadet placed a hand on the shoulder of the one ahead. They became a slow, deliberate, but connected organism moving through the gloom. Kyle, however, was lost. His people did not use such tactics. They relied on superior senses and technology. In the fog, his sharp eyes were useless. His enhanced hearing could only pick up the muffled sounds of the cadets around him. The equipment on his belt was silent and dark. He stood still, disoriented. The canyon, which had seemed so simple, was now a terrifying maze. He tried to rely on his own sense of direction, taking a few confident steps. He walked straight into a large boulder, the impact jarring him. He growled in frustration, "War Chief." It was Jin's voice close by. "You need to link up." "I do not need your help," Kyle snarled, his pride wounded. "Respectfully, sir, you do," Jin replied, his voice devoid of mockery. It was a simple statement of fact. The fog does not care how strong you are. It only cares if you are lost. Take Ty's shoulder. There was a long, tense silence. Kale could hear the slow, shuffling steps of the human chain moving away from him. He was alone in the green void. The feeling was deeply unsettling. For the first time in his life, his immense physical power was meaningless. He was as helpless as a newborn. With a grunt of pure annoyance, he took a step forward, his large hand finding the small shoulder of Cadet Tay at the back of the line. The cadet flinched slightly at the weight of the grip but did not complain. "Mira," Jin's voice came again. "Status." Mira was at the center of the line, a simple magnetic compass in one hand, a waterproof map in the other. She was counting her steps under her breath. "Bearing is correct," she reported. "The canyon wall should be on our left. We need to follow it for another 500 meters to the next checkpoint." They moved like that for hours, a slow, blind caterpillar in the fog. Kyle did nothing but follow. He was a passenger. He felt useless. He watched the back of the cadet in front of him. He listened to the quiet, confident commands from Jin at the front and the calm, precise updates from Mira in the middle. They were not strong, but they were organized. They were not fast, but they were relentless. They had turned their individual weakness into a collective strength. He, the mighty war chief, was the one who had been assimilated into their system. He was a part of their machine. The fog finally began to clear. The green mist thinned and the vast red walls of the canyon reappeared. The cadets broke formation, stretching their stiff muscles. They had reached the checkpoint, a small cave with supplies. Kale stood apart from them, looking back at the fog-filled section of the canyon they had just navigated. He was silent. The lesson was sinking in, and it was a bitter one. He had believed that in a raw survival situation he would be the master. Instead, he had been the liability. The humans, with their simple chains and their basic compasses, had mastered the environment not by overpowering it, but by adapting to it, by working together. Jin walked over to him, offering a canteen of water. "The fog is the hardest part. It is mostly endurance from here." Kale took the canteen. He looked at Jin, really looked at him. He saw no arrogance in the young man's face, no gloating. There was only the quiet confidence of someone who had done his job well. "You knew the fog would come," Kale stated. "We trained for it," Jin said. "It is a problem to be solved. We solve it together." Kyle drank the water. The word "together" echoed in his mind. It was a word with little meaning in Cathar culture. Togetherness was for the weak who needed protection. Now he was starting to wonder if it was instead a different kind of power altogether, a power that did not shatter against obstacles but flowed around them, patient and unstoppable. He had come to the crucible to find their breaking point. Instead, he had found the source of their strength, and it terrified him more than any battle cry. The crucible ended. The cadets of Jin's squad were exhausted but triumphant. They had passed the final challenges and now stood dirty and tired back at the academy gates. War Chief Kale stood with them. His obsidian hide was caked with Martian dust, but he carried himself differently. The rigid, proud posture was still there, but the contemptuous glare was gone. It was replaced by a deep, thoughtful silence. That evening, he walked into the cadet mess hall. The room was a loud, bright space filled with the smell of hot food and the sound of young people talking and laughing. It was chaos to Kale's senses. On his ship, warriors ate in silence, focused on fuel for their bodies. This was different. He found a quiet corner and sat, his large frame making the human-sized chair seem like a toy. He watched. He saw a group of cadets at one table, their faces lit up as they reenacted a part of the crucible. One cadet waved his arms, demonstrating how he had almost slipped on a rock. His friends laughed, not in mockery but in shared relief. He saw Jin and Mira sitting together at another table. They were not talking much. Jin was eating methodically, his body already recovering, his mind already planning for the next day. Mira was sketching on a data slate, her brow furrowed in thought. Then Jin silently pushed his bowl of fruit toward her. She looked up, smiled faintly, and took an apple without a word. It was a small, simple action. It required no discussion. At another table, Cadet Tay was helping a younger cadet, a first year who looked overwhelmed. Tay was pointing at a data slate, explaining a complex physics problem. He was patient. He was helping a potential rival. This made no sense to Kale. He saw a cadet who had performed poorly in the crucible, his head bowed in shame. Instead of being shunned, two others sat with him, talking to him quietly, one of them clapping him on the back. They were sharing his failure, lessening its weight. This was not a group of warriors. This was a web, a network. Each person was a single strand, but together they formed something strong and resilient. You could break one strand, but the web would hold. It would repair itself. He had spent days looking for their strength in the wrong places. He had looked at their weapons, their tactics, their physical power. He had found them lacking. But here in this noisy, messy room, he saw it. It was in the connections. Jin noticed him sitting alone. After a moment, Jin stood up. He picked up 2 cups of hot tea from a dispenser and walked over to Kale's table. Mira followed him. "War Chief," Jin said, placing one of the cups on the table in front of the alien. It looked tiny next to his massive hand. Kale looked at the steaming cup, then up at the 2 humans. He did not dismiss them. He gestured for them to sit. They sat in silence for a minute, the noise of the mess hall swirling around them. Finally, Kyle spoke, his voice a low rumble. "I do not understand your people." It was not an accusation this time. It was a confession. He looked at Jin. "You are a soldier. You train for war. You must be ready to die. Yet you value one life so much." He pointed a claw at the fruit bowl on the distant table. "You share your food. You help the weak. You carry the wounded. This is a contradiction. In war, these things make you slow. They make you vulnerable." He turned his yellow eyes to Mira. "You are a strategist. You think in patterns and logic. Yet your greatest strength seems to be this feeling for each other. This is not logical. It is a variable that cannot be calculated. It is chaos." Mira wrapped her hands around her warm cup. "It is the only thing that can be calculated, War Chief," she said softly. "Because it is constant. We will always fight for each other. An enemy can know our weapons. They can know our numbers. But they can never predict the lengths we will go to for the person next to us." Jin nodded. "A Cathar fights for the glory of his name and his clan. It is a powerful reason. But it is a single pillar. If it falls, the will to fight falls with it." He looked around the bustling mess hall. "We fight for him," he said, pointing to Tay. "And for her," he said, pointing to a laughing cadet across the room. "And for the families we have back on Earth. Our will is not one pillar. It is a million small ones. You cannot break it. You can only break us one by one, and there are always more." Kale stared at them. The concept was so vast it was dizzying. He had thought their sentiment was a weakness. Now he saw it was a different kind of armor. An armor that covered not just the body but the entire species. "You do not fight to prove you are the strongest individual," Kyle said, slowly working it out. "You fight to ensure your people survive." "Yes," Jin and Mira said together. "And this is why you are so tenacious in war," Kale continued, a grim understanding dawning on his face. "This is why you never surrender even when the battle is lost. Because the battle is never just about you. It is about everyone behind you, everyone beside you." He fell silent again, looking at the tiny cup of tea. He thought of the fog in the canyon. He had been strong but alone, and so he was lost. The humans had been weak but together, and so they had found their way. He had come to the academy believing humanity was a minor puzzle, easily solved. He now realized they were a paradox. They were physically fragile yet morally unbreakable. They valued individual life yet would sacrifice themselves for the collective without a second thought. They were not the galaxy's ultimate warriors. They were something far more terrifying. They were the galaxy's ultimate survivors. And to make war on a species like that was not a challenge. It was a plague. You might win every battle, shatter every army, but you would never break the web. You would only make it stronger, more determined, more united. You would awaken a hive, as Mira had said. and it would keep fighting long after a more honorable species would have laid down its arms. Kyle picked up the small cup. He brought it to his lips and drank the bitter tea. It was a simple act, but for him it was an acceptance. He was accepting their truth. He was accepting that their way, this illogical, chaotic, sentimental way, was a form of power he had never imagined, and it was a power that, in the vast, cold logic of the universe, might just be unbeatable. The final day of the Cathar visit arrived. The atmosphere in the Commandant's briefing room was tense and formal. The Cathar warriors stood in a line, their postures rigid and imposing. The human officers and senior cadets, including Jin and Mira, stood opposite them. Commandant Park stood at the head of the room, her hands clasped behind her back. The week had been long. It had been filled with challenges and disagreements. Everyone expected a final sharp comment from War Chief Kale, a parting insult to reassert his people's dominance. Kale took a step forward. The room fell silent. He did not look at the Commandant first. His yellow eyes swept over the faces of the cadets. They rested on Jin, then on Mira, then on Tay. He held their gaze for a long moment. Then, he turned to Commandant Park. And he did something no one had ever seen a Cathar war chief do to a lesser species. He bowed. It was not a small nod of the head. It was a deep, formal bow from the waist, a gesture of profound respect in Cathar culture, reserved only for worthy rivals. A soft, collective gasp went through the room. The other Cathar warriors shifted, their stoic expressions showing surprise, but they did not question their chief. Kale straightened up. His voice, usually a thunderous rumble, was low and measured. Commandant Park, officers of the Academy, cadets. He paused, choosing his words with care. I came to this world to observe a military power. I believed I would find one. I was wrong. He let the words hang in the air. No one moved. I did not find a military power, he continued. I found a different kind of power. One my people do not possess. One we do not understand. He began to walk slowly along the line of human cadets. I saw your training. I called it slow and predictable. I was wrong. It is patient. I saw your strategies. I called them dishonorable tricks. I was wrong. They are the wisdom of a people who value life. He stopped in front of Jin. I believed a warrior was defined by his strength alone. He then looked at Mira. I was wrong. A warrior is defined by his will. And your will is a fire that does not burn out. Kale turned to address everyone again, his voice growing stronger. A Cathar fights to prove he is the strongest individual. It is a clean, simple truth. We fight for the glory of the single mighty pillar. He clenched a massive fist. But a human. He opened his hand, gesturing to the entire room. A human fights to ensure their people survive. You do not have one pillar. You are a forest. You are a city. You are a hive. To defeat one of you is meaningless. To defeat all of you, I do not think it can be done. He looked directly at Mira, remembering her words in the mess hall. You were right, cadet. To provoke humanity is not to challenge a warrior. It is to awaken a hive, and a hive does not fight for conquest. A hive fights for its home. It fights for its future. There is no force in the galaxy more determined, more relentless than that. He walked back to the center of the room, facing the Commandant. The galaxy sees your technology. It sees your ships. It counts your soldiers. It believes it knows you. It is wrong. The galaxy does not know your true strength. It is hidden in your mess halls. It is hidden in your loyalty. It is hidden in your simple, stubborn love for each other. He offered a final, solemn warning. My advice to the galactic community will be this. Do not misunderstand humanity. Do not mistake their compassion for weakness. Do not mistake their patience for fear. To make an enemy of humanity is not to start a war. It is to invite a storm that will not end until every last one of their people is safe. He gave one last slow bow to the Commandant. You have my respect, and my warning. With that, War Chief Kale turned and led his warriors from the room. They marched out in silence, the heavy sound of their boots echoing one last time through the academy halls. Later, Jin and Mira stood on an observation deck, looking out at the star-dusted blackness of space. The twin moons of Mars cast a pale light on the red landscape below. The academy was quiet now. The visit was over. Mira shivered in the cold air. He was afraid of us at the end. Jin nodded, his hands resting on the railing. not of our weapons. He was afraid of what we are. They were silent for a while, watching the pinpricks of light in the void. Each star could be a friend, or it could be a future enemy who, like Kale, would misunderstand them. We are not the galaxy's ultimate nightmare, Mira said softly. No, Jin agreed. We are its guardians. We are the quiet wall. We are the patient storm. He thought of Kale's words. A hive, a forest, a city. They were not just cadets. They were a part of something vast and interconnected. Their strength was not in being the strongest individual, but in being an unbreakable part of a whole. An enemy could break a single will, but they could never break the web. They would just make it stronger. They would make it angrier. They would make it more determined. Jin looked at Mira, then back at the stars. They were not a nightmare. They were a promise that any who sought to harm their people would face not just an army, but a species that would fight with every ounce of its being, not for glory but for each other. And in the cold, hard logic of the universe, that was a force that could not be defeated.